Welcome, welcome, welcome. We have another phenomenal program for you in the series How to Create a Tiny Business That Makes Big Money. I have been talking to the speakers behind the scenes, and you are in for a treat. First and foremost, let me introduce myself. I'm Helena Escalante, your entrepreneur in residence here at the New York Public Library's Business Center. And as you are getting settled, go grab the bevy of your choice, etc. I am going to read to you a quick little blurb that we have from our legal department. And that simply says that the library uses Zoom for this program, but it does not own Zoom. Zoom has its own privacy policy that you can read on its own page. Zoom also has closed captions if you need them. All you need to do is click on the CC button on your screen wherever you find your Zoom controls. Also, to understand how you and the library use Zoom, please go ahead and read the library's privacy policy, especially the section that refers to third-party library service providers. And I'm going to ask my team to drop that link in the chat for you. Also, a friendly reminder that at the library programs, everyone is welcome and respected. We love you, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. In that same spirit of respect, we also ask that you please refrain from any kind of self-promotion, sales pitch, or any other type of offer. Also, a reminder that the chat is used solely for us panelists and speakers to talk to you. But if you have any questions or any comments, please go ahead and use the Q&A button to submit those. That's how you can communicate with us. And of course, we love reactions. So if at any point someone makes you laugh, please send us a happy emoji or a party emoji or a heart emoji or whatever emoji you're feeling like. All right. And also a reminder that if you'd like to hear more about the programs that we have coming up, which are pretty cool, all you need to do is sign up for the Business Library's weekly email, and my team is going to drop that link in the chat. And now, without further ado, let me introduce our panel moderator, who you all know and love. She is an independent journalist who has written for many, many years for super prestigious business publications such as Crain's, Forbes, Inc., etc. She's also the author of two phenomenal best-selling books, Tiny Business, Big Money, and we named this series after that book precisely because it's so effective and such a great book, and also the $1 Million One Person Business. So let me bring her in and give her a round of applause, please. Elaine Popelt, coming in. So glad to have you, Elaine. The floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Helena, and thank you to the team at the New York Public Library for supporting us and bringing these incredible efforts together. And thanks to the audience for coming in the middle of August on a day when you could be at the beach or the pool. You're working on your business, getting ready for September to start on your business idea. This program came as a result of your feedback. We always have those feedback sheets on every event, and a lot of people are looking to turn their ideas into a marketable business. And by idea, we mean invention, but we also mean services, and we mean internal IP. And we've got a really great lineup for you today. I'm just going to introduce folks in the order in which I can see them. We have Joey Healy, who you know from the $1 Million One Person Business. He is a founder of Joey Healy Eyebrows and is not only a studio owner, but also is an inventor of makeup. He's been quite successful with his line of eyebrow makeup. Raquel Graham, whom you probably saw on Shark Tank, she's got a huge following, and she's been on several of these events. She's back from Rock Innovation, and she has invented multiple products. We have Andrew Sherman, a dear old friend of mine who is a partner at Brown Rudnick. He's an expert on intellectual property. He's written about 18 books, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, including Harvesting Intangible Assets, which is about IP. And we get a lot of questions in the feedback form about how to protect your intellectual property. And Dan Mezaritsky, who's the founder of Fitness on the Go, he was kind enough to join us from Las Vegas, and he's been traveling. He has his innovation is within his company. He came up with this giant CRM-like system where all of the workouts were stored, and he licensed out the brand to other fitness trainers. So he took the idea of being a fitness trainer well beyond what that normally means. So I'd like to start with each of you. If you could just give us 1 or 2 lines on what you're up to now, because one of the things I always find out on these programs is, even if I talked to somebody last week, the $1 million one-person businesses and tiny businesses that make big money never slow down for anyone. Joey, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Joey Healy. I'm an eyebrow specialist. I own, as Elaine said, Joey Healy Eyebrow Studio in New York City. And I also do own Joey Healy Eyebrow Collection, which is a series of products, powders, tweezers, pencils, serums, you name it, we have it. So I am up to what I was up to 10 years ago, which is doing eyebrows and running and managing a busy store in New York City, and just kind of growing. It's always growing. So just staying busy, and it never stops.
Raquel?
Hi, my name is Raquel Graham, founder and CEO of Rock Innovation. Thanks for joining, everyone. So Rock Innovation is a product development company, which is a very fancy way of saying that I develop products that are inspired by my life. My first product was Next, and it came from a frustration with my children. And ever since then, believe it or not, I really didn't launch any products in the child market, except this year. That's what's new. I have a whole new line of children products coming out, which is an extension of the headlights line, which is a hat with a removable and rechargeable light. That's what I won Shark Tank for.
And Dan?
Hello. I guess, yeah, I started Fitness on the Go. How many years now? I think it's September. It's going to be 19 years ago. But I started my travels almost 9 years ago, which is crazy to believe. But now I'm setting up a biohacking retreat in Costa Rica, in Uvita. So just a couple of days ago, I was down there, and so that's kind of my, I guess, the personal trainer version 2.0. But now it's a little bit more that I really just love to wake up and play with all of those gadgets and learn what's happening in that space and feel incredible, and then be able to take that to the next level of high performance, whoever it is that wants to feel that for a couple of weeks at a time.
That's exciting. Dan was a decathlete, and he created his business out of adversity. He was injured, and that was how he became a personal trainer. And then he built this $1 million one-man business. He's one of the original $1 million one-person businesses. And it's been so exciting to see all the things that you've done with your training, reminding me of how we can all repurpose our skills in many different ways on this whole journey of entrepreneurship. And Andrew, how many books have you actually written? It's a lot, right?
It's 26, so you did short me a few books, but that's okay. By the way, Raquel, I saw you on Shark Tank.
Oh,
You were amazing. You stood up with poise and grace. It's a lot of hard work. Then you were awesome.
Thank you.
But I'm doing the same thing I've been doing for 40 years, representing entrepreneurs, David versus Goliath, writing, teaching, doing anything I can to educate the entrepreneurial community. And I thank you and the New York Public Library System for having me on this panel.
Yeah, Andrew is a huge champion of small business. And we have Andrew on because on pretty much every one of these events, there's somebody who asks a legal question about protecting their intellectual property. Can I go out there into the world with my ideas? Is someone going to steal my ideas? So we have the source here who can answer your questions. So I encourage you to put them in the Q&A, and any questions for the panelists. I'll be checking it periodically to see what questions you have. So I may jump into the normal questions and ask them a few things that you're submitting along the way. So let's go back in time a little bit, because the people on these events usually are a mix of people thinking about starting a business, people who are just starting to, and people who are well into it and maybe very advanced entrepreneurs. Can you think back to your first concept that you turned into a business, and how you pulled it off? Does someone want to take that?
Sure. So mine is pretty, like I said, I started my company really because of my kids. It was during the polar vortex. They were, and I lived in Chicago at the time, and they were pretty young. And they were, if you remember the polar vortex at the time, especially in Chicago, it was, you could not leave the house without having every bit of your skin covered. And my kids were melting down every morning. They hated scarves. And it was, I can't explain the mayhem. It was just, and if you know, just trying to get out of the house as a working mom, it was not happening. So after a couple of weeks, I said, you know, this, no other house is going through this. They said that it was, you know, bulky and itchy and they didn't like it. And I said, okay, fine, let me just go online and find something. Now, when you have young kids, a turtleneck is not an option. Obviously, they didn't like scarves. Anything long and bulky is not an option. So I realized at that point that there really has been almost no innovation in the scarf market, except maybe, you know, we might have grown up with wool and now you might have chenille or something like that. But other than that, and gaiters don't work either. Anything that goes over the head, a kid is not going to want to wear. So I just decided to go to the material store and I picked fleece and I cut and glued iterations together, had a friend sew them, and then had my kid, gave them to my kids. The idea, it's kind of like, depending on how old you are, it's basically fabric with a patented closure in the back. Like a dickie would have been over your head, just enough fabric to cover the neck. And the idea for them was to make it interactive, so that I did it in fleece where, you know, soccer balls, et cetera, they could pick. And they finally picked one that they never took off when they got home. And that is how I came, and that is how my company started. It ended up, I made one for myself, friends liked it, and then I submitted it to HSN and have sold out ever since.
That is so inspiring, because you took your inspiration from everyday life and had the ultimate honest market testers out there. Andrew,
Right.
quick question. You know, she was showing it to friends. Was there any risk that she could lose control of the invention by doing that?
It depends on the context. It's always good for early stage entrepreneurs when something's still an idea. It's not protected by intellectual property until it advances itself just a little bit further. So I'm sure everyone on this call has heard of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. What the NDA does is it creates an intellectual property right, excuse me, by way of contract. So I've entered into a contract with the recipient of the information not to disclose, possibly not to compete if that covenant can be enforceable. But be careful in the early days, because you probably have not developed something that will quite yet be protected by patent, trademark, copyright, or trade secret. But at the idea stage, it can still be protected by contract. As soon as Raquel had her design, and if it had some features that could be patentable, then it would elevate to that level.
Interesting. I'm going to jump in with questions like this because it's so rare that we have someone like you in these calls. And obviously she lived to tell the tale of not doing that and has done great with it. But well, it's always good to know the right way, you know, like on paper, you know, so that we all know for future reference. Joey, you know, your innovation was your patented, I think it's patented, your eyebrow design. And you were teaching that methodology to other stylists in the early days of your business when I first met you. How did that come about? I mean, because it is a very unique look, and yet there's a zillion eyebrow stylists, as I found when I followed you on Instagram, and about 100 of them followed me back. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a tight community. Well, kind of the genesis of my business, I was 23 years old. I started my business in like 2009, 2010, where there was a lot of white space in the brow market. It was just, you know, I knew these women of New York City. At the time, I had worked at Bergdorf Goodman selling makeup as like a sales associate. And these were the women who were buying a $1,200 dress on the 4th floor and then going to get their brows waxed with a nail service down the street. So I thought eyebrows, as I think all now know, are super important, and they really frame the face. And so tweezing only was my method, but it was tweezing, it was trimming, it was tinting. So I thought that there was a lot of opportunity for advancement with a service that's 50 minutes. It's a lot of consultation, it's a lot of care that goes into it, education, showing people how to finish their brows with products and how to use them daily, which is also obviously an opportunity to sell tools and cosmetics. I started my business really by doing house calls. I lived in the Upper East Side at the time, and I went around the Upper East Side doing eyebrows, and that was sort of my Trojan horse in was the convenience, because for New Yorkers, nothing beats a little bit of convenience. And then I was able to grow my business. When we first met, I was really probably just me doing brows. I feel like we probably met in 2013, 14 at this point. And in 2015, I opened a larger brow studio in downtown Manhattan. I could be at my house upstate right now, and they're open there doing brows at the moment. So, that's the idea of the entrepreneur, is to scale something beyond yourself. And that's where that technique sort of came into training, teaching, educating the employees and empowering them to kind of carry on the method in a more traditional retail sense. But I started with an idea, an opportunity, and house calls.
And Joey also introduced his own brow makeup as sort of he's a business student. You were a business student, and he has this talent for eyebrow design, but he had the business acumen too. And he introduced a line of makeup as an add-on for the salon visits, so that when people came in, they'd leave not just with the service, but also with some of the makeup. And that is, we talked and did a story about this, where that got him through the pandemic. He was selling the makeup so people could do it at home. You use private label, right, for the makeup?
Yeah, it's a mix of private label and contract manufacturing. So over the years, the line has sort of grown and changed, and we have all different manufacturers, and some of it's private label, which has been really, really wonderful for us. But diversification of revenue is, I think, super important. We are a very hands-on service. There are no feet of distance, but we are hand on face. And so during COVID, I thought, wow, this is going to be difficult because of these restrictions, and it was difficult. But the product line was selling. I was using social media to teach people how to do their eyebrows, and we were selling tweezers, scissors, brushes. So I kind of really leaned heavily on that diversification to get a revenue stream coming my way, which then was able to patch us up and get us through the pandemic.
It's such a good lesson, because the world is so unpredictable right now, and having those multiple revenue streams that people can purchase in different ways really gives your business resilience. So it's just something to think about. That's why I have a mix of products and services here, because there's a lot of crossover. You don't have to really limit yourself to one thing. And Dan, your innovation is really fascinating to me. He invested heavily in technology from a very early point, and as a solo, and created, I don't know if it's technically called a CRM system, but it's this big souped up software program where it contains a ton of information about the business. The trainers can store their workouts there for the clients. It's used for financial things. Tell us about your thinking around that. And you've white labeled it, I believe, too, where other people can license it.
Yeah, I explain it as it was probably the biggest mistake that I ever did. That turned into the biggest win, because ultimately, I was like 20, 22, 23. So this is, 17 years ago. And there weren't too many options out there that were pre-made. And so, but there certainly were. I probably could have found something and they would have grown with me. But instead, I just went with my idea of everything I needed to have for my business, the wish list of how I could make my business operate extremely smoothly. And so I spoke with certain developers and got quotes. And one was 100,000, another was 50,000, and then these university students offered a little bit less, about 25,000. After, 3 years, I gave them at least $250,000, and after 10 years, I invested at least $500,000. But over the course of the last, the 17 years that I've had it, it saves me well over $200,000 a year. Because I would have had to, be paying some other service for it, as well as I've been able to, as you mentioned, white label it and help other entrepreneurs that have a similar service-based licensing or franchise business use my platform. So that's why it at the beginning, that was probably not the best use of the money, because I wasn't making that much, and it just kept, as I mentioned, having to pour money into this in order to make it happen. And so that seemed like a mistake, but it turned out to be, a smart move, let's just call it.
That's good to hear, because we all make mistakes and sometimes they pay off. That's really good to hear, Dan. So there's a question from Martha that kind of dovetails with one that I had. She said, I wonder if participating entrepreneurs can suggest or give tips on how to find out what kind of products or services the market needs locally, nationally, or globally. I think this is a question for Andrew too, because you're seeing it from the other end.
Sure.
Where people come to you and they're like, is there really a market for this? And I wonder, Raquel, you got an idea from your children, the experience with your children, but on an ongoing basis, I know you're a fountain of ideas. It's not your only product. Do you have a practice where you try to meditate ideas, or, do they just come to you during the day? And how do you then know if there really is a market for them?
So my process is actually the opposite, because I actually don't think about what the world needs. Every single idea. So Next came from a frustration. Headlights was the same thing. I'm a runner. And at the time, we're going on 7 years now, the only option to run with, there were no hats with lights at all, just headlamps. So usually it's a frustration that occurs, very much like a lot of Shark Tank products. Like you're just going through your life and something happens and you realize that it's not out there, or if it's out there, it could be improved, and you make a version of it. And all the products that I have now, Headlights now has grown from one product to about 10. So I've created extensions of them, but it's still the same concept. So the same thing, I have 2 products coming out in Q1 with home tech. Same thing, me working around my house and not having this. So for me, it's the opposite. It's literally my everyday life, and I have a book full. So there's so many. And what I've been successful, I think, because the products are actually pretty simple. They're simple concepts, and they improve your everyday life. It just improves it either by saving time, or it's just efficiency. And a lot of people seem to agree. So I've been fortunate in that way.
Elaine, one of the things that I teach in my course at Georgetown and at University of Maryland is teaching the students how to identify an idea versus an opportunity. All of us are capable of ideas, but can those ideas mature into a genuine opportunity? And whether Raquel admits it or not, she's probably got some screens and filters that she uses, whether it's market surveys or, talking to others to find out, is this genuinely an opportunity? I think Dan gave a great example of, it seemed like a good idea. I was spending money. I wasn't sure there was an opportunity there. And then he pivoted sufficiently that now, of course, it's an incredible opportunity. And those screens and filters are really important, because entrepreneurs are very emotional. We will get attached to ideas that may or may not be viable. And so it's really good to communicate, have a kitchen cabinet, a series of friends or peers that will tell you the truth, that says, hey, this is something I would buy. Even going back to Shark Tank, you see sometimes the panel will say, I would buy that product, but I won't invest in your business. And that's a very nice way of saying, we're not sure there's an opportunity here as an investor, but we kind of like your idea as a consumer. And so that's just, one filter or screen that you see being put in place.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at things. Well, Dan, you're doing something new right now, right? You are doing this retreat in Costa Rica. How did you know that there was a market for it right now? Did you wait till people signed up for it, or did you build it and hope they will come?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, without getting to, let's say, in the spiritual realm, but I think that whatever you want to bring to life and create, you shouldn't be looking from the outside, right? If you kind of say, oh, I think that there's something missing, like if I studied, Joey's business, and I'm like, oh, well, there's something in the brow business that I think I could really improve and make it better. Even though that might be a thought and it might be true, if it's not something that truly interests me, then my resilience for it is going to be, paper thin, or at least much thinner than somebody like Joey. That this is just he loves it, so that's why he can persist. And same as what Raquel says, she's looking at what she's just doing in her life, and that's, I think, the key is just what is it that I'm doing within my own life, and what do I want to share with others? And so that's where it's like, if as Raquel said, this is just something that was needed in her life. She wanted it for her kids, and now she figured, hey, other people can use this too. I'm just setting this up for myself, so worst case scenario, I'm going to have a beautiful, amazing biohacking center. But I know that, that's just, people are going to want to come and essentially spend time with me. And I'm not saying this from an egotistic standpoint, but that's what drives most businesses with entrepreneurship. If you're selling a coffee machine and you're not drinking from it that coffee every day, then you're not really what are you creating this for? So that's where when you walk the walk, everything is aligned with yourself, then that's how magic happens.
Well, you're raising a really important point, which is you have to be willing to geek out on the subject. You have to like it and be almost willing to do it for free. And if you're
Absolutely.
that passionate about something, somehow I found with all of these entrepreneurs, I think in the 2 books I've interviewed, probably $90 million one-person businesses, or maybe they have 1 or 2 employees. And at this scale, it's driven by the passion of the entrepreneur. And if that's not there and you just did the market research and found an opportunity, you probably won't make it happen, because you've got to love thinking about eyebrows, or thinking about Costa Rican retreats, or thinking about neck scarves, or you won't do it. And that's part of the whole magic of this thing, is figuring out what you're passionate about and what you're willing to put that kind of time, energy, effort, and love into, or it won't happen. So I know there were a number of questions on the spreadsheet. Go ahead.
Can I just add one more point to what you said?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I completely agree with Dan on, I mean, from the bottom of my heart, is that an entrepreneur has to be operating on a basis of passion. But at the same time, having represented thousands of early stage companies, that passion can be both a blessing and a curse. The curse is if you have backed yourself into, a rose-colored glasses view of the world, and you're convinced that your idea is a genuine opportunity because you are passionate about it. I think that you have to have passion at the foundation of the business, but then step out into a world of objectivity where you can run some type of preliminary tests or alpha or beta products to know that you're not about to spend your entire life savings and maybe the life savings of others to pursue a business where there's a limited marketplace. Some ideas solve problems, but people aren't willing to pay sufficiently for the solution to that problem. That's where I applaud all 3 entrepreneurs. Not only did they have an idea that they were passionate about, but the hardest part, customers paying for that product or service.
That's a very good point. I think the ultimate test is, are people actually paying you now? Like if you start putting it out there,
Exactly.
but I wonder for all three of you, before they get to that stage, is there sort of a little test that you do to make sure it's worth it to go one step further with this, with your own commitment?
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on that, because I think along the process, you do have to see where the opportunity is. So the reason why in my intro, I said, finally, I'm doing something for kids, even though I made Next for Kids, Next, I never entered the kid market, because the opportunity came when I made the leopard one for myself, and then female saw it, and then I ended up on Home Shopping Network and the Grommet, et cetera. And it was no, I'm sorry, my first account was actually on college campuses. So it bypassed the kids market. Now, sometimes an entrepreneur may be so passionate that it was created for kids, and that's where I want to stay. What I did was I went where the opportunity was. So I ditched the kid market and went to the college market, which was licensing. And then HSN came, which was the female market. And I literally never did it for kids. So I started because of my kids, but I never went to that market until now, 10 years later, have now come back to the kid market. Because as an entrepreneur, the business side, that's part of your acumen. You need to see where the opportunity is and be flexible. That's one of the pieces of advice that I give. You may start off one way, but you've got to be open to see where it fits. When you created the idea, the environment may be different now, where, so you adjust and you're flexible to see, get in where you fit in.
That is such a great piece of advice. I almost want to hit like the replay button on this to play that again, because it's so important to stay flexible. You can't, I know a lot of people do business plans, but business plans are meant to be deviated from, because the world is going to give you feedback every single day about this business. Really great point. There's a really good question from Patrice. Where is the best place to start? If you have an idea and want to bring it to market, I see ads all the time for companies who offer invention ideas to help individuals who have an idea to present or develop. And I do think it's kind of a mystery with any, like whether it's a service or a product. Okay, it's day one of your business. Maybe you're working on it at night after work or something like that. Where do you even begin with this? And along the way, like you're putting up a website. There's another question here from one of the attendees about protecting your business name. If you put up a website, are there things people should be doing as they start taking these steps to make sure that no one steals whatever they're developing? I don't know if anyone wants to take that one.
I will. So for the development, there's so much research that you have to, first of all, I've never used any of those companies. They may be reputable. I can't really speak to that, but there's so many steps that you can take on your own. I mean, there's so much research. I always tell people that a lot of times people that have ideas, they're really in their head and they don't really step out of their head and start making the calls and doing the research. They do a lot of it in their head, and it's analysis paralysis before they even really get moving to do anything. And that's where all the magic is. Like when you start making calls or you start doing research or you go to get fabric. I mean, there are a trillion stages for trial and error, for you to think, okay, fleece might work, and then you get it and then it doesn't stretch or it doesn't wash. I mean, there's so many different stages, and you begin to find answers the more you do, way more than in your head. So I would say you begin trying to make, for me, I can only speak to products, and then you can begin to, for me, I started locally. I started with a factory in Chicago because I didn't know anything about manufacturing. So for me, I needed to be able to see what they were doing and to be able to speak in a way which is like, I don't like that stitch, or because that just was not my, my expertise. And then you can bring on with an NDA a designer like I did who understood the manufacturing process. But there's so many steps that an entrepreneur can do on their own before you even need to hire, consultants, et cetera.
And let me piggyback on that, if I could. 20 years ago, entrepreneurs had the burden of trying to do market research and other things, and it was very, very expensive and almost impossible for many startups. Today, we have SurveyMonkey, we have Kickstarter. I mean, we have all these different platforms that make market research more efficient. And for those of you on today's webinar, I hope you'll use those platforms, because it's a way to convince not only yourself, but others that, hey, I've got something here with momentum and upside. All three entrepreneurs got right into the trenches and proved the worth of their business and their customers. But if you're unclear, or if you just don't even know that many people, there are a number of platforms now where you can get initial feedback on your product. And, it's become kind of a very efficient way of doing market research.
Oh, there's a good one that I like. It's called PickFu, PICKFU, where you can put up images of your product, brand names. It's kind of like A/B testing, but with a twist in that you get feedback by whatever demographics you select. So if you're marketing to 13 to 17-year-old boys, for instance, you could check that off, and you can expand and contract the list of qualities that you're looking for, like live in the Northeast or whatever you're looking for, and get really interesting feedback. And they police it pretty well to make sure that it's quality feedback. So that's a tool I learned about from Camille and Ben Arneberg of Pet Honesty, who are in the $1 million one-person business. But there's a lot of new tools coming out. But there's also a simple tool, which I think we tend to underestimate. I mean, I know Joey in the beginning was walking up and down the Upper East Side of Manhattan, going to these different women's apartments and styling their brows. He had these celebrity clients like Kira Sedgwick, and he was listening and asking them what they wanted. And I think we sometimes overlook that and go to the tech tools right away. But every time you have a conversation with somebody, you're getting feedback. Did you get any good insights from your customers during those early days?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that I still get lots of insights from my customers because I am very client facing. I see 44 clients a week, 4 days a week, 11 clients. When I'm developing new products, I know the end user because I work with the end user. I have conversation with the end user. They buy products, they give me feedback on them. And, the feedback can be very small, the packaging, just the longevity of the product. So it's nice to be client facing if possible and to spend time with the end user. It's also interesting when we talk about kind of gathering feedback. Don't listen to your friends and family because they love you so much and they want you to succeed, but listen to those 13 to 17-year-old boys who are the end users of the product if you can't spend time with them in your business. But I feel like it's really important to kind of be with the clients. And so I was lucky enough to be able to kind of grow through service. So I didn't have any big risks with scaling. I did not have overhead. I didn't have a Manhattan store. I didn't have employees to pay. I was able to sort of test the market by just getting out there and doing it. And Raquel, that's like such a good point. There's so much you can do before you need help. You just have to do it. And that's like the hardest part. For myself, when I was giving clients eyebrow services, I was making the service price, maybe a gratuity, but I was sending them to Sephora or Saks with a list of products that I thought that they should buy that I didn't even think were that great at the time, an eyebrow pencil, an eyebrow gel. So that was an opportunity that I could grow from there by listening to the clients, listening to their feedback. I probably wouldn't have created product if I had not been so intimate with the end user.
That's a really good point, because we always hear you're supposed to work on the business and not in it. But I think that's actually a fallacy at this stage of business, because you do need to have some contact with the customers and read some customer emails. And not that you want to be doing all of that yourself, but I mean, Joey is growing and scaling his business, yet he still sees a certain number of customers a day. And I know Raquel gets emails all the time from fans and customers that she responds to. And Dan,
but I have the perfect example for that. Even when I made it, my first big account was Home Shopping Network. And for all of those orders, they go through their customer service. And then as I expanded and I started doing like TV promotions, which then started going through my email, through our customer service email, I learned so much more. And I didn't even realize that some issues and improvements that I learned from going through my customer service, it helped so much. And I was at a good stage, but having the company handle the customer service, I lost contact with the customer. So I really do pay attention to customer service emails a lot.
Well, that's a really great tip as well. And these things are free. A lot of times on these calls, a lot of people are coming in with little access to capital, if any, and they're really financing everything out of the money from their job or their savings or whatever. And these are things that anybody can do if they invest the time, which is,
Elaine,
I love those types of tips. Go ahead, Dan, sorry.
I just want to, because I feel like we're probably going to be shifting into a different question, but I just think that this might be very important for people to hear, especially if we bring it back to the origin of any business, and when people start to ask their friends, I wouldn't take any advice from anyone you don't want to be like. And that's just really important, because if you are talking to somebody that has had a really bad go at being an entrepreneur, and you're like, hey, I've got this great idea, yeah, I don't think it's going to work. Clearly, right? That's their experience. So surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and talk to them. That's very important.
Put that on a meme, right? That's a really good, there's so many good nuggets in this conversation. I'm loving this. Okay, so
just one last point to tie all three stories together. Remember, if you are going to need capital from third parties, one of the most important questions that sources of capital are going to ask is, who else beyond you thinks this is a great idea or thinks it's a great opportunity? And so the thing running through all three stories that were just shared is this point of validation. Joey, by the time Joey, if he ever needed outside capital, by the time he presents to an investor, he's got 3, 4, 5 different points of market validation. And that is what helps de-risk the investment in the eyes of the investor. Even though we call it venture capital, they're actually trying to mitigate risk, not increase their risk. They're just investing at a higher level of risk than other investments that are out there in the marketplace.
Great advice, Andrew. Okay, so the practical now. We have a question from Melina. She doesn't have sewing skills and wants to create a prototype. Vanessa talking about creating a rough prototype, but wanting to protect her idea along the way. Patrice asking about if there's any protection against knockoffs when you're working with factories in other countries. Let's talk about that. And I think this applies equally to things like Dan's software or Joey's methodology, because there's always going to be people that see what you're doing and think it's a good idea and are copycats, but you still need to produce something eventually that's going to be a prototype of what you will sell and get it out there in front of real people. So how do you find that balance? Like, we do have to take some risks of getting it out there, or else you'll never get any feedback, yet you don't want it to be stolen. Maybe we could go through a few of the steps. If they have an idea, what are like steps 1, 2, and 3 that they could take today to get going on it? And then keeping in mind what Raquel said, there's probably like 80 steps that they could take, but just the first few to get them going, and then they'll start figuring out what the other ones are.
I can start. Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, because you both can speak on this a little bit more than I can, because I'm so service driven, but really branding is obviously very important. People can get their eyebrows done anywhere. But when people come into the brow studio, I like when we're like, oh, I have an appointment with Joey Healy. It's a Joey Healy brow experience. It's like, you don't say you're going to spin class, you say you're going to Soul Cycle, because you identify with the brand and you're proud to affiliate with the brand. So creating a really tight brand strategy, keeping in touch with your clients via social media, and kind of growing growing a community, I think, is a really, really big way to differentiate yourself, because people will copy you. And if you have a good idea, people will rip it off, and you can protect it. And Andrew would probably say the same. It's, you can protect up to a certain point, but other people are going to sniff out a good idea. But like, you know, I've had the brand for 13 years. You can't make a brand overnight with a reputation and a community. 13 years later, we have, you know, the Joey Healy brand. So I think that that's something that is really, really worth kind of making like an airtight kind of plan to have that brand. And then copycats can copy you, and then that's flattering, but you have the brand.
That's a great point. I mean, Dan, when you were letting others license out your software, I mean, is there anything you do to make sure that other people don't copy it and create the same thing?
Again, maybe my answer is just a little bit different, but I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's about you, right? Like it's your ability to either sell, it's your ability to train other people to sell. And so are there other softwares that potentially are even better? Are there other products and services? Absolutely. And all that you're trying to do, you don't need to take over the world, right? You're not going to appeal to everyone and to sell to everyone. And so as long as you have your values, your community that wants to connect with you, and you're leading this charge, then people are going to, you know, be attracted to it. So that's where I think that when people are so caught up in, oh no, someone's going to steal my idea, yeah, they will, and there's going to be copycats, but just focus on, you know, what you need to do. If you get up, I need to make 14 phone calls in order to book, you know, 7 meetings, and I know that I'm going to get 1 sale. And if you do that for 5 years in a row, then you'll have a very successful business. So, you know, it's just focusing on what is it that I need to do, and not be afraid of actually doing it. Otherwise, I mean, I'm just looking at it from a point of view, I guess, as a track and field athlete. I'm running in my own lane. I don't care what's happening. If as soon as I start looking left or right, then I'm not focused on myself.
I'd like to add to this too. Entrepreneurship is really, really hard. And in the beginning, when I went to my first trade show, it was my first time having a panic attack, because it was like my first time that I showed, you know, I had been working on it and sharing with a small group, or I had and all of that. But when you now expose it to the world, you realize like, oh my God, anyone can take it. I've been in this long enough now to go on Shark Tank, where the big boys can steal it, et cetera. You know, I was always afraid, not wanting to go too big, because Old Navy could see it and they could steal it. But for the most part, what you do is so hard that many people that you think are going to steal it are not, because it's too much damn work. I promise you that. I'm not saying that people won't steal, like larger, you know, and depending on who you share it with, but for the most part, this is good luck if you want to take this on. It's not your everyday person that's going to do it.
Yeah, let me add to what everyone said. First of all, there's an old saying in entrepreneurship that says you can't sell if you don't tell. And, you know, many people become frozen or paranoid. They're so afraid of their idea being stolen that they never launch the idea into an opportunity. You know, if you look at the history of American business, I mean, for every McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Avis to Hertz, there's FedEx to UPS. You know, when Fred Smith submitted his business plan to his business school professor, he got a D, because they said, well, there's already a company called UPS that does overnight delivery. Fred didn't listen, and he created a competitor. I wouldn't be afraid of competition. You know, as Joey said, in some way it's a compliment. And I agree with Joey's advice. Brand, especially in a consumer facing arena, is everything. You could discover the formula to Coca-Cola but you'd still have to convince people that it's a good tasting beverage, and Coca-Cola has, about 100-year jumpstart on you building their brand. It's not like before Joey started his business, women didn't pay attention to their eyebrows. They did. Joey added what we call incremental value and a certain amount of proprietariness to that process, which I respect. But what he really did is build brand. And I'm sure even Joey would admit there's maybe hundreds of competitors out there. He could drive himself crazy if he wants to think about all of them, or he could just stay focused on building his business.
I would say that's absolutely true. And we are a part of a certain market. And like Dan had said, you're not trying to take over the world. And that's absolutely true. You can get your brows threaded. You can get your brows waxed. You can spend $5. You could spend $200. And there's enough eyebrows in Manhattan. Thank God I don't have to do all those eyebrows. My hands would be in ice buckets right now. So I love the broader scope of the market, but I know where I am in the market. And so for people, there's two obstacles often to the service. One is the price point. The other is booking in and finding the time. It takes a couple weeks to maybe book, but I'm positioned in a certain place. I don't try to be everything to everybody.
And what also Joey has done is really understand his marketplace. If I were doing what Joey was doing, New York would be, I'd move there if I had to, because I'm not going to get the same reaction in Ames, Iowa, and nor the consumer discretionary budget. So he's in the right place at the right time with good branding, good products, good methodologies. And if he did expand outside New York, he'd have to make sure that there's enough eyebrows willing to pay for the services and products that he's got.
Well, I think you're touching on something important, which is the experience is important too. I mean, and nobody can out Joey Healy, or no one can out Dan Mezeritsky, Dan or Raquel. This is the strength of the one person business or the tiny business is there's personality to it. There's a real person. People think about how many automated things you have to do since the pandemic. This might have some automation, but eventually they can get to the real person. And that is part of the brand, and the strength of it is they can contact Joey and give him an idea for how to do the brow makeup differently, and he'll get back to them. And I think that's pretty powerful. People often think they have to look bigger than they are, but people, I think, like small, they like it. That's a real authentic person there.
I saw something very interesting on Bloomberg over the weekend. They did a survey around trustability. Small business owners were the most trusted citizens of this country, well ahead of politicians and government leaders and even university leaders. The average consumer trusts a small business owner more than they trust anybody else in the country. And we should use that to our advantage and use it as the asset that it is, because that means all small business owners have worked to earn that loyalty and trust. And what you see on today's panel are three entrepreneurs who have not abused the trust that their consumers have placed in them.
That's a great point, Andrew. Okay, so Heidi, a psychotherapist in private practice in New York, has a question. Are there any methods for standing out and inspiring people who want to pay for my services instead of them using their commercial insurance? And we see this a lot with professional services. Like I go to a holistic dentist, for instance. That's the differentiating factor. And he's got lots of content. He's extremely passionate about holistic dentistry. How does somebody, if they want to innovate and come up with sort of a concept for their business, like Joey Healy eyebrows or fitness on the go or the headlights, how do they find that within their own business, regardless of what the business is? Like what questions could they ask themselves to try to get to the bottom of where they could really stand out and be unique?
Well, I think that you put your soul into your business, like Dan was mentioning earlier. So it's so much of it comes from you, and that is the advantage of it not being a large corporation. And that's, to Andrew's point, why people do tend to trust entrepreneurs is because like you're kind of laid bare and you see them in their own business reflected. So instead of, I think, scrambling and trying to think, what do people want from me? You can look deeper inside of yourself and say, what do I have to offer people? And kind of lead with yourself. I like the idea of personalization from an entrepreneur, and people tend to like that too. Even as far as social media is concerned, sharing some things that are personal, letting them know that the brand has like a real soul behind it. And from that, I think, comes like a brand philosophy. Like we have, a strong kind of ethos and philosophy on Eyebrows, but also on the broader scope of the beauty industry. And, the beauty industry can get kind of nasty because it's telling you that you're not pretty enough, you're not good enough, So we have like an ethos and a brand that's born from, I like to think myself, that then is, I find employees who I feel like can, they hold that as well, but I train them in that method. So it comes from kind of like the heart and soul instead of pure market research.
I love that, Joey. I'm just going to pause for a moment. Dan was kind enough to join us when he's 3 time zones away and traveling. He's got to jump off. But Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people contact you if they have specific questions about your business? So is Instagram the best place? And could you?
Sure. Dan.travels. Yeah, if anyone wants to connect, then feel free.
That sounds great. He's got a great Instagram feed where he's living the lifestyle that he's going to teach everybody at his retreat in Costa Rica, traveling, eating healthy, all kinds of meditation. Just our conversation on books alone could be its own program. He's read so many interesting books. So definitely contact him. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you, Elaine. Great to meet Joey, Raquel, and Andrew. Thank you guys. And I hope you have a great next half hour.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we have some more interesting questions here. It does seem like a lot of these stem from anxiety about people losing control of their idea. One of them was about here. All right, I lost it. Actually, let's skip that one because now I can't. I think I deleted it by accident. but anyway, people are talking about going to investors with ideas too when they're at this stage. And I know you each use different routes to financing. Could you talk about that a little bit? Like, at what stage of idea development do you start going outside? I mean, it might not be that relevant to your two businesses, but maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
I was first self-funded and not with a lot of money. And then I literally have been friends and family up until recently, really. Finding funding has been just nightmarish, at least in the traditional sense. So if there's an opportunity, I also used some of the non-traditional banking, I can't think of the names, but one is a female organization, going through as doing tons of research around non-banking organizations, but more civic organizations, et cetera. And actually the way I funded my first college order was through a local program, a billionaire in Chicago who wanted to support fashion in Chicago. And I was able to get a loan based on the PO that I had. So it really is a good thing to do a lot of research around alternative financing, like PO financing and things like that, because there are ways to do it. And now there are opportunities like Kickstarter and all of those where you can, those weren't around, or at least I didn't know about them, when I started. So, but in terms of going to like a venture fund or something like that, that was never successful for me.
Oh, actually, while we're on Kickstarter, I found the question is from Darlene. If you put a product or invention on Kickstarter, do they own any rights to it if the product is not patented? Do you know that the answer to that, Andrew?
No, they don't. It's a platform. The only thing of publishing your idea on a platform is it increases the chance that someone's going to look at it and go, wow, that's a great idea. Maybe I can do that. But as all of our panelists have said, it's a lot harder than they may realize. But no, as a platform, there's no ownership. These platforms vary in their fees. There are some accelerators and incubators where being housed in the incubator will cost you some equity in addition to rents, but that's because their business model is like a quasi venture capitalist. So, they're not looking to just incubate companies to earn rent from them or charge day-to-day business services. They want to incubate companies that one day will become, the next unicorn, and they got equity early on.
That's a good point, because they're all over the map. I mean, sometimes if they're at universities, the IP was developed at the university, so they may have a stake in it. That's where you need lawyers, because it gets a little complicated. There's another related question from Alice. When you reach out to places that make things for you, how much of a stake do they get in your product, or do you just pay them a fee to make it? And I would think that's all over the map too, but I think you all would know more about the manufacturing aspect of it.
Yeah, there are venture contract manufacturers that take a bit of a venture capital view. Most of them just want to be paid for, the services that they're producing. And the part of the answer to that question is, what can you afford? If you can't afford to get these things contract manufactured at the pricing that's being given, what else do you have to offer, but equity? And they'll either see the value proposition of that equity or they won't. It really does depend on the entrepreneur's situation.
Sometimes there's drop shipping and that sort of thing too, where you're basically a funnel for orders for the manufacturer, and then they let you pay later. I've seen a lot of different quirky ways of doing things, so you don't always have to give up equity. There's another related question about how soon people should, from Cheryl, how soon should I trademark my brand, logo, name, slogan, etc.? So as you're going about this, different people are coming into contact with your business. And while there is only one Raquel or one Joey, you still have to be a little bit cautious. I mean, any thoughts on that, anyone?
I think that's the first thing you do before the minute you have for me, I trademark like immediately before I even know if I can even do it. I mean, immediately, anything that I can do ahead of time, I do that first before I start going out into the world with.
Yeah.
And that includes URLs, just holding on to domains just before I move.
Raquel is 1000% correct. You can file now at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office what's known as an intent to use mark and extend those. Your URLs are now as valuable, if not more valuable, as the trademarks themselves. If you feel reasonably certain that you're going to be heading down the path, trademarks, and which supports Joey's point on branding, are probably the most efficient way that you can begin giving yourself a proprietary edge. The only thing I would say is, filing a trademark is an important step, but building a brand is the most important step. There's lots of thousands, if not millions of trademarks that got filed over the years, but you've never heard of them because they never built a business. So it's definitely a 1-2 punch.
I would also probably say, sorry to cut you off. I would also say with trademarks too, it's not that hard to do. So it's not like you're doing a design patent. So don't let the idea of it intimidate you. Just do a trademark. I mean, there's a million trademark lawyers who can help you out. It's basic foundation work, like Raquel said. We all lit up. We're like, now, do it now, because the time is right away. But it's also not that intimidating of a process. So just don't get thrown off base by thinking lawyers and legalities. It's really not so difficult to do.
Say that like it's a bad thing, Joey. Come on now.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
not a
easy.
million, like a half a million, but it's not a million.
Yeah.
And how much can, like, I know this question is popping into people's heads. How much is this going to run me, in terms of costs? Would you say several $1,000s or less than that?
Yeah, let me explain. Joey's right. The filing for a trademark online with technology that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has, it's a relatively easy process, and there's a filing fee paid to the federal government. Where it gets complicated is when you get back the first office action. Sometimes the office action is very simple, like you need to change this part of your design or clarify this. But sometimes the office action is 3, 4, 5 pages long, and a professional trademark lawyer needs to respond to that office action. And then there could be a second office action 6 months later before you ultimately get published in the official Gazette and it goes official. Now, if you're using a lawyer for that whole process, all in, it might be $3,000 to $5,000. If you're using a lawyer for part of that process, you can reduce your fees, if you do the initial filing. But unless it's a very significant office action with lots of complicated arguments, and frankly, if the office action is that long and it's going to take you more than that to clarify, you may want to think about modifying your brand. But definitely do a trademark search and see what other brands are out there. And those are available again on the USPTO website at no charge.
Wow, this is great information to have, because this is why it's important to make sure that there is a market for what you're doing and do that initial legwork, because it is a little bit of an investment. And so, or it could be a lot depending on where you are with your savings and what your income is. So you have to make sure that it makes sense for you. And Hasna has a question. Once you've selected your product and company name, what are the next steps? TIN, LLC, name availability, trademark, NDA. Is there sort of, it sounds like the trademarking is what you should do first, but is there sort of an order to all of this that people should be following?
The basics are typically formation of an entity, filing for trademarks if the trademark's going to be relevant to your product or service, and that's the type of business that you're building. Registering with the localities, whether that's for a business license or filing for brand name protection at the state and local level. Those will get you the basics in place. Please keep in mind, this is a very important misconception, that naming your company is not the same as filing a trademark. I could form an entity tomorrow that is Joey Healy Enterprises, and I'm going to focus on men's beards. And it may or may not be an infringement of Joey's trademark because I'm in a different marketplace, but the entity name itself does not confer any inherent trademark rights unless I was doing it just to cause confusion in the marketplace. And don't worry, Joey, I'm not launching the beard probably next week, but I think it is a heck of an idea. I want to get into the men's market. It's only about 3 inches down from the eyebrow,
It's close.
Still same place. All 3 male panelists today were wearing beards, so
Right.
could
It's
be
the third eyebrow.
being on the panel.
3 people, that's a trend, right? It's like, as a journalist, right? If you know at least 3 people, it's a trend story.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all great stuff. Just
Joey, the
for
beard.
the benefit, well, for the benefit of people that are really new to business, what do you mean by an entity, Andrew?
When everyone starts as a sole practitioner or as a partnership. If there are more than one founder of a business, then those co-founders ought to have some arrangement between themselves. And so whether it's a limited liability company, whether it's a corporation that makes the S selection for small business, whether it's a general or limited partnership, you want to form an entity relatively early on, because the beauty of that entity is not only does it facilitate a vehicle for future investment, but it gives you certain limited liability protection. So if, God forbid, 100 times something horrible happened while Joey was treating someone's eyebrows and, a knife hit the skin or, whatever it may be, he is not going to be personally liable if it was ordinary negligence. Now, if he meant to poke the person in the head, I'm afraid there's nothing I can do to protect you from criminal prosecution. But the general day-to-day liability, if things are kept in the name of the entity that you form, allows you and your significant other to sleep at night knowing that at least some basic form of personal liability is protected.
There's a question from Garfield about the mentors. How do you get a mentor to help you with all of this? Because it seems like just having you on this program is mentorship. You probably save people hours and hours of time today by giving them the rundown. But people, as they go along, things are going to come up. Did you have mentors? Were you part of any type of organization that helped you along the way? That we had that guidance?
I did. Actually, two of my biggest mentors who actually invested through convertible notes were two former bosses, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, and to this day, they're very successful. So they are my, I go to them for business questions, but they were former bosses. Another mentor is a former business school professor. And yeah, so I have different levels of mentors, but usually, what I have found from the people that have invested or given me loans, when people believe in you, like I believe that a lot of my investors, and even if you see my Shark Tank episode, they will invest in you and your character, and they know that we will do what you say, and they believe that you can pull it off. So it's mentors, I think, are incredibly important because they can save you years of agony, and it's a shortcut to advice, really.
I'd also say,
oh, go ahead, Joe.
Because Jeff, I'd also say like having peers who are also entrepreneurs. I surround myself with lots of peers, and it's really good validation because, as Raquel said and Andrew and Sachi, I mean, it's very, very difficult work. So that support system built around you in the present, I think, is very important, and it's important to be with other entrepreneurs who can kind of uplift and support you, especially when things are tough. And applause to everybody on this Zoom right now, because this is you being extraordinarily proactive, maybe curious on one side of the spectrum to really ready to go, or maybe already in a great place with your business. But what a wonderful thing to take time out of your day to do things like this. You should give yourself quite a pat on the back. That's a wonderful place to be, where you're willing and open to learning. So that's wonderful.
Elaine, if I
oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Pick back on this. I mean, first of all, you've written about this in your books, Elaine, and in the other writings that you've done. Entrepreneurship is very, very lonely, and loneliness leads to all kinds of fears and stress and anxiety. I agree with Raquel and Joey. To do it alone without some mentors that you can bounce ideas off of, that will be honest with you. You remember, you're looking for mentors, not cheerleaders. You don't, if I'm an old friend of Joey's, I'm not doing him any favors if every time he has an idea for me, I tell him it's wonderful, because I don't want to hurt his feelings. So mentors have to be strong enough to tell you their honest truth about, their reaction to your ideas. And you can get that mentoring one-on-one, like Raquel explained. You can get that mentoring by setting up an advisory board. You can get that mentoring by joining peer-to-peer groups like EO. I mean, Elaine, you and I both go way back with Vern Harnish, and YEO, which is now EO, has these peer forums where you're in forums with 9 other entrepreneurs going through the same types of struggles that you are, and everything is forum confidential. And one thing I really love is in forum, advice is banned. You can only speak from the perspective of experience. So if I'm open my mouth to help Raquel solve a problem, it better be based on experience, not just my opinion. And so some of these can be very powerful. If you get your business further along, I would look to these various peer groups, advisory boards, and then of course your own personal mentors.
That's good advice. I wasn't wincing at the advice. This wasp got into my house and just
Oh, no.
why?
Yeah, it's good to clarify that.
before the event. But yeah,
I
this
hope
is,
you
I mean, the
don't-
loneliness really can get you. And I think you can feel, if you're only around your corporate friends, you can feel like you're crazy doing this thing. So it's important to be around other entrepreneurs, even if it's only on these events. But I do want to say the library has a wonderful series where a number of the people who have been in these group events have gone on and done their own series, like Kathy Guggenauer has done her own. Jason Allen Scott is doing a series on podcasting. All of these things are related to the main idea of running a one-person business. And I have people sometimes who think the one-person business is very selfish, like you're just in a little vacuum. And the truth is they all seem to know each other independent of me. They're part of a big connected universe of people, and reaching out to other people is really the best possible thing for your business. There, in New York, there's the Empire State Development Corp has local chapters where you can get free advice. And on a national level, there's the Small Business Development Centers run by the US government, which a number of people in the books have used who got involved with manufacturing, and they got a lot of concrete help with finding a manufacturing plant. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to check out. Like people will go on Alibaba to find a factory, but you have to make sure that it's a legit factory, that they're not using child labor. You know, there's consultants that can help with that. And that's the kind of thing that if you get that one-on-one help with experienced people, it can save you so many hassles, wasted money. I mean, you'll still have things that go wrong. I remember there was $1 million one-person business was manufacturing a type of protein bar and spent this $50,000 inheritance on the first batch. And then it turned out on the shelves, there was a spice or an ingredient in it that sort of ripened and ruined the whole batch, you know, but she went on and the business grew to over $1 million. She's also a Shark Tanker. So these things sometimes, like Dan's invention that like he didn't know if he should keep doing this, you still learn from them, but it's better if you can avoid those types of things.
But also,
it allows dollars to go further.
Elaine, we are, as a society, we are the most willing than any other country in the world to give advice, to help others, our whole country was built on people pulling themselves up from their bootstraps. We applaud success. We have dozens of TV shows where people perform and win. You know, look at Raquel appearing on Shark Tank. I mean, there's no country in the world that is as supportive to the small business and entrepreneurial community. You know, you mentioned the federal government with the SBDC program. They also have the SCORE program, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. There's no, the New York Public Library is a wonderful example. I mean, anybody listening on this podcast that thinks there is no sources of objective advice, you're not looking very hard. There are, billions of dollars of taxpayer money spent every year to build networks also at the state and local level. You have library systems like the New York Public Library system that are literally sitting and waiting for you to come in and say, hey, do you have a resource on X? And happy to help. There's so many resources. Believe me, if you travel around the world, they admire how many entrepreneurs our country produces. But the answer is because of our willingness to mentor, our willingness to educate. Many of the adjunct professors, Raquel mentioned her professors as a mentor, are just there to share their knowledge. And we do it willingly, and we do it with enthusiasm and passion.
Well said, Andrew. I'm going to give Joey and Raquel and Andrew a quick chance to give us some parting words of wisdom, and then I'll turn it over to Helena, because the business librarians are a great resource on the topic that we're talking about today. So Helena, once I hand it over to you, maybe you could just share a little bit about how people can access them, because this is where they could save hours and hours of time. But I'll start with, I'm going to go clockwise, so with Joey, then Andrew, then Raquel.
I guess a parting word of wisdom, and it's taking in all of this last bits of conversation. When you had said, like, sometimes people think a one-person business can be a little selfish. I think it really brings up the question of ego in your business too. And you really do have to leave your ego at the door, because it is so much hard work. There's glory when things go right. But I would say that Raquel, Dan, and we would not say that we have it all figured out. And just because we are lucky enough to be in a position to be kind of panelists, there's still a lot of learning to do. So I think really there's no end to the learning, and that has to be the spirit of the entrepreneur. Not that you figured something out, it's about you, you're building your brand to put yourself on a pedestal to get all of the glory, because entrepreneurship is something that people do, they seek out, I think, because it looks so glossy on like social media. But you really have to leave your ego at the door. And if you're not willing to learn, I learned a lot today, which is by the way that I like to kind of approach everything. And so, you have to always be willing to learn and always be the student, even if you're in a position where you could be the teacher. I'm sure Raquel's mentors are learning from Raquel, and they're learning from others. It never stops the learning. So again, like kudos to everyone here, because you're obviously in a place where education is valuable to you.
Thanks, Joey. Andrew?
Well, you were kind enough to mention the Harvesting Intangible Assets book, so I feel like I can't not mention it in the closing comments. I was only half joking with Joey about beards. Part of being in business is understanding the intangible assets that you've created and how that may expand into other opportunities. And there are probably some components of Joey's proprietary process that could apply to beards or other types of hair on our bodies. And it'll be up to him to decide whether to pursue those opportunities or stay focused. But possibly someone approaches him and says, hey, you've built a fantastic brand. You're busy focused on eyebrows. Can I license your brand and methods, and I'll take care of beards? There are thousands of successful companies that are actually licensees of a particular co-founder. So there's so many growth strategies available to you once you get your idea matured into an opportunity, and opportunities for growth and diversification. And Raquel's a great example of that. So it's been my pleasure to be on the panel, and anything I can do to help any of the attendees or future watchers of this webcast, I would be happy to do.
Oh, wonderful. And if each panelist could just put your LinkedIn or wherever you prefer to be contacted on social media, there might be some follow-up questions that are very specific from people that I didn't cover just because they're that specific. Raquel?
Oh, sorry.
Words to share.
Best for me is just email at Brown Rudnick, asherman@brownrudnick.com, and that'll get to me immediately.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing your email. And Joey, you're on Instagram.
Instagram is a great way to reach me. DMs Joey Healy Brows on all platforms, most active on Instagram. And I'd love to connect with anybody who had follow-up questions, or if I could be of service or help, I would be happy to. Joey Healy Brows.
Or that needs eyebrow work.
Exactly. Book an appointment.
I need to come in, Joey. Okay, Raquel.
And
always have such.
I'm putting it in the chat. It's best to go to my personal Raquel S. Graham on Instagram. I'm putting it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I think it's really important to understand that there's really no guide manual to entrepreneurship. There's no step-by-step guide is what I mean. There are a lot of similar experiences, but the beauty and curse of entrepreneurship is that you rarely have a similar day. Every day is something new. Every day is a new problem, but many wins. Many highs, many lows, but it is, if you take action, I say this all the time because I just see, everybody has an idea. I don't know, I mean, because I'm in the idea business, trust me, I know. I think I would have a bigger business of helping people bring their ideas to life than even what I do now. That is really the crux of all of the email that I get. People have ideas and they don't know how to bring it to life. And I have spoken to many people, and I would say 80% have rarely taken 10 steps out of their head to pursue this. It becomes this, and I think it's bigger when you start making the moves. This I'm confident of. The answers and the universe really opens up in a way that you can't imagine. Who falls into your life, who you meet that happens to be in manufacturing, who happens to have a second cousin who just opened a food. I mean, it is, trust me on this. You have no idea who's in your network. Once you start, moving, who is going to come into your life. So it's out there. I say, go get it, but you've got to get out of your head.
Oh, that is such a great piece of advice, because if you don't act, there's no business, right? And we've talked about confidence, imposter syndrome, et cetera, but at a certain point, you just have to get in the ring with these things. And these folks have courage and have taken the leap of faith that they'll figure it out as they go along. So I'm going to turn it over. I mean, thank you all for just your incredible participation. This was so valuable and so inspiring. Helena, how can people work with the library to learn more about patents and trademarks and all the details of this going forward?
Absolutely. Well, we very often, frequently, we have webinars with representatives from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So stay tuned for those announcements, because we have them. I don't know exactly with what frequency, but probably once every couple months. So it's relatively frequent. So it's not every week, but it's not also every year, right? It's much more frequent than that. And also something really important, I dropped in the chat, and all of you will receive in the replay email the list that we use here at the library to give to the participants at the small business competition of the free groups that exist that provide business advisory for free. I mean, it's a wonderful list. It's a list of groups here in New York, but many of them are available nationally, and some of them will even take you on as an international client. So it's just a matter of finding one if you do not live here in the US. But if you do, you will find, a gold mine in there. But also, don't forget that here at the library, we have an immense treasure, and that is our business librarians. And here's what I always say: the mind of a business librarian is better, 1,000 times better than Google, because Google will return to you a million answers in 0.18 seconds, right? But which one is the right one? And a business librarian will always give you the information that is relevant to your business. And our business librarians are trained in finding exactly what you need for your business. And they have this amazing service, which is 30 minutes for free, one-on-one with a business librarian, tailored to your specific business. They will walk you through the available resources at the library, or they will point you to other resources that exist out there that you can take advantage of. So by all means, I'm going to ask my team has already dropped that link in the chat. Book your consultation, and if for some reason you need more than one consultation, do it. You do not, I mean, there's no limit on that, as long as they are helpful to you. Number one. Number two, you do not need to have a New York Public Library card to access this service. So wherever you live in the world, you have access to it. Take advantage of it, because it's really a phenomenal service and it's completely free. And with that said, I'm sorry.
Library. I mean, it's the most incredible library. If you go in there, all the different resources, et cetera. And because we were talking about mentors, and continually people don't have a lot of startup funds. This is for the public. It's free. They're extremely knowledgeable.
Yeah.
All the latest technology and databases, things that would cost many thousands of dollars to access. So this should be your first stop if you're looking for a mentor, and they will know the other organizations in your area where you can get more mentorship as well. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was such a
No,
cool
thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
but
No, thank you for that clarification. Absolutely. Because one of the things that the library has, also that is at no cost to anyone, is an enormous repository of databases. And databases are just an incredible tool. If you want to get a list of, let's say, vendors, competitors, if you want to get the list of, Raquel, when you were starting, for instance, who sells hats, who brings hats from China, or where, company X is selling their beanies, blah, blah, blah. So you can find all of these things. And Joey, for instance, you could have a list of, let's say, every single brow salon in the US if you wanted it, for something like that. So these databases are an incredible resource. They are super expensive. So the library pays an enormous amount of money for it, but it makes them available to everyone at no cost. So definitely take advantage of that. And with that said, again, our librarians are just there to help you, and nothing gives them more joy. Seriously, they geek out on this thing, to help you. So take advantage of that consultation, and they are wonderful, wonderful people. You will have a great time with that. Okay, so one last favor that I need to ask everyone, please, still on the call, give us your feedback. These programs are created because you tell us exactly what you want to know. You send us your questions, you give us ideas, and Elaine and I literally sit down and go over all of your answers, all of your feedback, and figure out what to bring you next. So thank you for all that you've done to make this program happen, but also please give us your feedback so that we can keep creating series that are interesting for you. And also a reminder, next week we have part 3 of podcasting for business. And if you missed parts 1 and 2, do not even worry about it, because if you sign up for part 3, you will receive the replay for the first 2 parts. So you will not miss a thing. And really, it's a phenomenal series. It's actually with Jason Allen Scott, which is one of the entrepreneurs that also appears on Elaine's books. So really, if you haven't signed up for that, what are you waiting for? Sign up now. All right. So Elaine, thank you so much for the program. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Raquel. Please know that you have an open invitation to come back anytime. You're always welcome. Thank you to my team behind the scenes. You guys rock. And thank you to everyone who is in heart mode and applause mode now. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.